Hello and welcome to the Stryd community. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about how to improve your running efficiency, and this coincides with our launch of learn.stryd.com and our new exercise instructional videos. And all of this is going to be dedicated to improving your running efficiency and also how to analyze your Stryd running data and then implementing these exercises into your routine. So today I am joined by the co-author of the article, Ko. Ko, can you just give a quick introduction on yourself and what you do here at Stryd?
Yeah, hey guys, happy to be here. I'm the human performance specialist here at Stryd. I did my undergrad at Harvard, master's at UVA, focusing on biology, kinesiology, performance science. Was a professional athlete myself in triathlon, but working full time at Stryd now, and yeah, loving it, loving helping people make the most out of the data for practical use cases, whether it's elites or people just starting to run.
And Ko, where are you sitting right now? Can you tell us about the area you're sitting in right now?
Yeah, I'm currently in the Stryd Performance Lab, so kind of give you guys a little look. Got the treadmill right here, lactate testing right here, just a little bit of everything going on. So, Stryd Performance Lab, you guys see a lot of videos out there in terms of our testing and everything like that. But yeah.
So we've had a number of videos in the Stryd Performance Lab recently, and you can find those on the Stryd YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, of course, you know where that is. If you're watching another platform, go check that out. Ko, can you just talk about some of the testing we've done there in terms of, the performance testing and some of the shoe testing?
Yeah, we've done a little bit of everything. It just depends on what the people or the people who come in are looking to work on. We do anything from VO2 max and lactate testing to baseline foot path and metrics to see, how people are recovering from an injury, or just to set a baseline to see where we can improve certain things, which we'll kind of touch on today. Um, and to shoe selection, like most recently, we had Reed Fisher come in before Boston to figure out what shoe was best for him. Um, I mean, whether it's elite or a couch to 5K runner or anything like that, like these things do make a big difference in the long run. So it's been great to be able to do a little bit of everything with everyone.
So I hope that gives the Stryd community a little peel behind the curtain on where the magic happens here at Stryd. And the topics we're going to be covering on today's live stream is where to find this new release, checking out learn.stryd.com, how to access this material. The second is the instructional videos, where those can be found. And then third, we're going to go through kind of a step-by-step process on how you can conduct your own experiment of one and incorporate these exercises in your routine. So specifically, I'm going to be updating my training routine today with the expert advice of Kale, and incorporating these exercises so I can improve my metrics and get ready for my next marathon. So step number one here is, where can you find this material? And that is very easy to access. That is going to be available at learn.stryd.com. So if I type learn.stryd.com into my browser, I'm going to be taken to the Stryd Learning Center. And right now we have our first release here, Improving Your Running Efficiency with Stryd and gold medal coach Bobby McGee. And we can just tap right into that here. And we're going to be taking this kind of Wikipedia style site where you can jump to the table of contents and access things such as understanding what Stryd metrics mean, identifying personalized insights, accessing those video links, of course, and then understanding A to Z, how to then go through the improvement feedback loop, and then case studies of other users. Ko, so we did work with Olympic coach Bobby McGee, and could you kind of take us through the process of how this material was created?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, we've had these Stryd metrics available to everyone for a decent amount of time now. Single pod user, dual pod user, and it gives so much context to what your running looks like and to your strengths and weaknesses as a runner. But we just felt like we needed to make it more practical, more actionable, and kind of build that bridge between, okay, these are numbers and these are things that I can do that actually make use of them. So I collaborated with Bobby on this, and obviously Bobby's, a leader in this field of improving running efficiency. And he has a way of looking at it in terms of using movement and drills and range of motion to impact these variables. Because I mean, we'll get into it more later, but it's hard to just improve one metric at a time, and like you can't force yourself to improve these metrics. You have to do it in a holistic way, and that was kind of just the impetus for this article, and just giving power to the strategies in terms of making use of the data more, and data that's been there for a bit as well.
The second part of this new release is the Improve Your Running Efficiency drills, and these were recorded with Olympic runner, Olympic steeplechaser, and Stryd-sponsored athlete and employee Val Constein. So these are also going to be available on the Stryd YouTube channel, and these are going to be available conveniently whether you tap on the playlist tab on the Stryd YouTube channel or just that home tab there. So of course, you can go through the article, but now we're going to take you through a step-by-step process on how to start implementing this. And really, the first question is we have all these drills that have been released, I believe 15 different drills, videos. And now the question is, which one should I select and focus on? So, Keo, what is the first step here? When I open up my Stryd Power Center, what's the first area I should look at, and what data should I be looking at to determine which of these 5 metrics am I going to focus on? What drills am I going to start diving into?
Yeah, so the data visualization we're looking at here are distributions made available through the monthly footpath feature. And basically, we're looking at May of this year. And basically, what this is showing is where Gus falls on different metrics compared to other Stryd users of his gender and age. So basically, kind of run through the metrics that the article will also highlight as well. ILR is impact loading rate. So that's basically the amount of force that you're absorbing, or like the rate at which you're absorbing it. So you can kind of basically think of it as like how much force you're loading on either side of your body. The blue is your right foot here, and the orange is your left foot. And then LSS is leg spring stiffness. So basically, you can think of leg spring stiffness like a rubber band. That higher, the more stiff the rubber band is, when you pull it back, it'll snap back harder. So basically, that's the amount of energy you're getting back. The harder it snaps back, the more energy you're getting back every time you hit the ground. And then vertical oscillation is the amount of up and down movement that you're getting. Duty factor is the percentage of time that you're spending on the ground versus in the air. And then all of these are, you should look at them in terms of the metric themselves. So for impact loading rate, you want to have less loading and less force on your body per step, because that's going to help mitigate injury risk. So on ILR, you want to be on the lower side of that distribution to, like I said, reduce injury risk. LSS, on the other hand, is the opposite. You want a stiffer rubber band so you get more of that energy back. Vertical oscillation is a little bit more complicated. I usually like to look at it with form power, which is basically our vertical component of power, because we want to basically quantify flight time. So if you're bouncing up and down a lot, but you're not using more power to spend more time in the air, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because having more flight time versus duty factor, for example, ground time, is a good thing. It means you're more efficient. So vertical oscillation is something that is a little bit more complex to analyze. You can't really generally look at a high vertical oscillation and say you're getting a lot of flight time. So in that vein, I would usually aim for a lower vertical oscillation in terms of having basically a more steady up and down movement. You're not wasting power in the vertical component. So usually I'd look towards the lower side of the distribution for that, just from the simple standpoint. And then for duty factor, as I mentioned, less time on the ground is more efficient. So we want to look at the lower, like aiming for the lower side of that distribution as well. And then for Gus specifically, do you have any like subjective areas that you feel like you'd want to work on?
Yeah, that's a great question. To put this tool in context here, I'm going to jump over to my Stryd Power Center account. And as Keo said, I can access that by tapping on the footpath tools on the left sidebar here. And then that's going to load in this distribution. I have a screenshot in here. So Okay, well, that's a great question. What do I subjectively feel like I need to work on? And before I answer that question, I do see there are some bars here. We have a yellow bar for cadence, and we have blue and yellow kind of orange bars for the rest of these metrics. And what do these bars mean exactly? And when there's two bars versus one bar for each of these different metrics?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned it when I talked about impact loading rate, but basically similar to your foot path where blue is going to be the right foot and orange is going to be the left foot, that's same reflected here as well in distributions. So the blue bar is going to be where your right foot stands on that percentile distribution. The orange bar is going to be where your left foot falls on that percentile distribution. The reason cadence and CP only have one bar, it's because cadence isn't going to be the same regardless of the side that you look at because you're keeping an equal movement on both sides in terms of the way you're hitting the ground, and then you only have one critical power. So that's why you only see one orange bar there and not an orange and a blue because it's not going to differ between legs.
So to answer your question, how I'm subjectively feeling, I do feel like these metrics do kind of really align quite well. Where I do feel like my impact loading rate is kind of lower than average, and my vertical oscillation is a little higher than average. I do feel like since I am kind of in the middle of the distribution for both leg spring stiffness and cadence, I also feel like those do align with my feeling in that those are two metrics I could work on there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say from looking at this distribution, your impact loading rate and is doing great. Your vertical oscillation, again, I like to look at that with form power to really look at that more. Um, because you could just have, a lot of flight time, which is not a bad thing. But just looking at this, I think I'm also looking for asymmetry as well. So usually when you work on a metric, um, and you have these asymmetries where the bars aren't right next to each other or on the same bar, then that means by generally focus on that metric, you can actually make that more symmetrical as well. So that's like another aspect of it. So I would look at like duty factor or leg spring stiffness for you. But since you mentioned leg spring stiffness as something subjectively you feel like you could get better at, then that's what I'd recommend focusing on. And then while we focus on that, we should hopefully see the symmetry come together more. Where I think it's saying your left is 12.8 and your right's 13.5. Hopefully, we'd see that go up and come together more, so they'd both be 14 or something like that.
So I've got the answer to my question, and I'm gonna dive into those two different areas here. And now the next step I can take is I can jump over to that YouTube channel and grab the drills. But just in case the answer isn't so clear from looking at that distribution, I kind of had this follow-up question: and how else can I determine what to focus on if that distribution chart isn't giving me a clear answer, or for example, I feel like, for example, my impact loading rate just subjectively doesn't align with that objective data. One of the other techniques I personally take is kind of looking at how metrics change over a run. So, for example, I kind of grabbed my last long run here and I looked at the first half of my long run versus the second half. I did see my impact loading rate did increase. Is this kind of a valid way of looking at what else I can determine to focus on? Is looking at selective runs and seeing how metrics trend over those runs?
Definitely, for sure. For the monthly footpath feature where you're looking at those distributions, I would also say that you can select different speeds as well in the dropdown, and those metrics will change based on that. So, for example, if you specifically want to look at what things look like at marathon pace and improving what your weakness might be at marathon pace, that might be totally different than what it looks like at your easy pace. So that's another way to look at it from like a holistic standpoint. But also this as well, because it looks that's the aggregate of all your data, whereas this is basically pulling apart what it looks like when you're fresh and what it looks like when you're tired, and those are two totally different things. So even though your impact loading rate might be especially low in your distribution, just looking at it here, but it increases when you're fatigued during your long runs and your key sessions, especially for a marathon guy like you, guess. That's really important to know, and that's something that you can focus on in terms of improving your impact loading rate when you're tired. We can talk about how you would help implement that at more of a specificity later. But looking at trends is very important, but I would say just with a grain of salt. You want to make sure that this is repeatable over many runs and not just one run where you just had a bad day or it's just a one-off. Because basically the combination of all those data points is going to tell you whether a trend's significant or not.
And that's a great point you just made. I can see already jumping across different speeds, kind of my more, typical easy run speed and versus kind of this higher intensity kind of marathon speed. I can already see my cadence distribution kind of went from middle of the pack to kind of below the pack there. So that's a tremendous point there. Looking at the different speeds and seeing how that changes. So I am going to be focusing on my leg spring stiffness exercise. So I clicked into that playlist on YouTube and I see these 3 exercises here: the dorsiflex leg raises, heel raised wall sits, and then endurance skipping. So I kind of have 3 different drills I can focus on. And one of the questions here is these are going to improve my leg spring stiffness. And I do see they kind of fall into these range of motion, movement, and drill categories here. And I was just curious, kind of, by improving not just my leg spring stiffness, but also improving my range of motion, my movement, and implementing these drills, are there other benefits I can expect to see by implementing these exercises into my routine?
Yeah, so basically the way to look at it is we're identifying by looking at, specific parts of our footpath that, might be strengths or weaknesses for us. That being said, you can't really just pick out one metric and say, okay, I'm just going to improve this one metric in isolation. Because, say, for example, you want to improve your impact loading rate. So you're forcing yourself to try and hit the ground less hard, or whatever you're trying to do to directly influence that variable. But oftentimes we see that if you're trying to directly influence a variable like that, especially when you're thinking about it, um, it actually makes it worse. And it again, everything's like interconnected. So just because you're trying to do something with one variable doesn't mean that all the other ones aren't also going to change. So the way to look at it is to identify the variable that we want to improve. So for you, leg swing stiffness. And then basically we're gonna tilt it on its head. And the reason that we do that is so that we look at it from a modality perspective going down. And that's why we have these range of motion, drills, endurance. And the reasons for that mostly is because one, the metric up perspective, where you're looking at the metric and trying to just isolate it, it fails in structuring practical improvement because we know that changing one metric will unintentionally result in differences in others. Kind of like how I touched on, pulling a lever here will result in unintentional consequences over here. Secondly, there are little to no exercises that affect only one metric at a time. So we need to look at planning the improvement through a lens of general modalities that complement one another. And that's what all of these recommendations do and why we have them in different categories. And then third, running's like a first language. Like I said, if you think about just like trying to like force your way to, hit the ground softer, whatever it is, to decrease impact loading rate, that'll actually kind of backfire on you a bit. And you kind of need to go through the flow of natural movement and natural drills and range of motion to actually get those benefits. And the reason we have those 3 modalities is because one modality might work especially well for someone. Say, for example, maybe for your leg spring stiffness specifically, your range of motion is the thing that's specifically holding you back. And that's something that you'll discover over time through implementing these exercises and using the feedback loop that I'm sure we'll talk about soon. But they're just different ways of attacking the same metric in a way that is going to improve, hopefully, your running in general, but specifically that metric will hopefully improve as well because these are targeted for that general improvement.
Yeah, that makes me think of something because, so what you're saying, it's important to implement all 3 of these. For example, I'm already good at skipping. If I just saw skipping here, maybe I just add skipping and say, okay, I'm just going to keep skipping. But by adding in these 2 extra modalities of range of motion and movement, I might actually see even further improvements than just only adding skipping in my routine. So you're saying it's really important to kind of take this more comprehensive approach because it's going to holistically benefit my running.
For sure. I mean, like, for example, if we're thinking of range of motion, that's like stride optimization, injury prevention, reducing energy expenditure. Whereas running drills are more like awareness and efficient propulsion, rhythm and coordination, structural reinforcement, movement, for example, improved motor function, enhanced muscle recovery, optimize energy distribution. Like they have different reasons and different things that they hit on. So yeah, using a holistic categorization of each of all these exercises is the way to go because you're hitting it from multiple angles. But over time, you might find that, for example, you're so used to skipping. Maybe skipping's the thing that doesn't move the needle that much. But for you, maybe the range of motion is the thing that's holding you back. So focusing on those more range of motion exercises might be more beneficial for you to see that bigger improvement. And again, this just goes back to the feedback loop that I was talking about.
So now I have the question, how should I start to schedule these in my routine? I know I want to improve this. I know what drills I need to implement, the exercises I need to implement. So now here's a week of training I built a few weeks ago where I have kind of easier runs on, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, workout days on kind of that Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday with that long run on Sunday here. So I kind of wanted your perspective, KO, on what days I should be adding these exercises in, and basically how to start updating my routine with this new information.
Yeah, so I mean, you're more of an advanced runner and you've done a lot of these exercises before and things like that. So I would think about it similarly to lifting. And this kind of goes back to what I was also hinting on with the impact loading rate with you. It's great in that distribution when you more fresh, but when you get tired, it's actually more of a problem or it gets higher. But for example, doing things that mimic that. So for you, especially like for impact loading rate, I would put it on your hard days, make your hard days hard. Think about it like strength training. For example, you would do your workout in the morning. So say your threshold run in the morning, give it 4 to 6 hours as you do strength training, and then do it in the afternoon. Either you could pair it with strength training if you're doing it already. Some of these exercises can be replaced for plyo exercises. Some of them can be replaced for your lower leg strength exercises, and it fits really well into that. And the reason I bring up the impact loading rate when you're tired is this will help simulate it because you already did a hard run in the morning, and then in the afternoon your legs are going to still be tired from that, and you'll be able to make use of that improving your impact loading rate when you're tired, which is the specific context in which we see it increase. But I mean, for leg spring stiffness as well, like even if you're doing it in the same vein, it's still gonna have great effects for you as well. But again, practicing these drills and exercises when you're more tired is more of an advanced recommendation because you're used to it already and because the injury risk is lower because of that. Um, yeah. And then, for example, if you're a more beginning runner, I would actually say the opposite. So because you're so new to one learning these exercises and having that load on your body, I would definitely schedule them for easier days. And definitely start small. Definitely give yourself like rest. We're not trying to get this done as fast as possible. We're trying to make sure we're doing it with good form, make sure we're executing correctly, and make sure we're not making ourselves too sore for, say, the threshold run or the long run the day after, per se. We're really just trying to integrate this so that we can shift it to more advanced of we're making our hard days hard and we're making it actually part of our strength routine. Um, and we're just making sure that we're not doing these fatigued, we're doing them fresh, just to make sure we're not, overloading muscles or um, functioning that we haven't developed yet.
And if you have a question on how many sets you should be doing, how many reps you should be doing, you're going to see kind of ranges when you watch those videos, and as you read the article, you're going to see that lower range and those higher ranges of how to implement those. So for me, I will be putting kind of that higher range in. I'll be doing those after my hard long run days. And let's say, I've been doing these for a few weeks to a month, and now I want to determine, are my updates to my routine working? And we do have this improvement feedback loop within the article. And Keo, I wanted to ask you, for example, how often should I be conducting this kind of improvement feedback loop process? Is this something I should be doing on, for example, a daily basis, a weekly basis, or a monthly basis? How long should I expect to see results by implementing these drills into my routine?
Yeah, again, back to the experiment of one, it totally depends. It depends on the person. Some people might see really big gains in a short amount of time because it is such low hanging fruit for them that they've just never worked on it before. And some people might see it take longer and see like percentage differences over, a long amount of time. Usually a lot of metabolic adaptations, say if you're doing threshold training or double T or anything like that, takes at least 2 to 3 months for those mitochondrial adaptations. Mechanical is a bit different. It can be shorter, um, depending like how much of a low hanging fruit it is. But just in the structure of power center and using that distribution, I would say checking it every month, using that monthly distribution. So say we have May up that we were looking at just now. Um, we're going to implement that through May for you, Gus, and then we'll look um, how that May looks, and then we'll move on to June, check how June looks, and keep sequentially going from there. Because it can also give you insights to, hey, like I think that the range of motion stuff is really helping me. Like I do think I'm feeling a lot of improvements there. So I'm gonna focus more on the range of motion stuff. I'm gonna keep the movement and the drills there as well, but the range of motion is the thing I'm really gonna focus on for June. We're gonna see and check. Oh, actually, I was right. Like this actually helped me get way more improvements, and then that's perfect. We're gonna keep harping on that, or maybe we move on to another metric to improve. And it just helps you refine basically your process of doing things. Because again, everyone is different. Some modalities in certain categories might work better for some people than others, and it's kind of just making sure you're getting the most bang for your buck and doing it as smart as possible.
So KO, I'm loaded in May and April here, but I am only 9 days into the month of April. Would you say it's better to kind of look after the month is complete, so I have that full data collection? It's not just being influenced by just a few days a day, but I kind of have that broader comprehensive data collection throughout the entire month here. So, for example, I've loaded in March and April. This be a superior way to look at my metrics changing over time?
For sure, for sure. Like I said, with especially like considering like the look analyzing single runs, more data points is always better. One data point's only one snapshot in time, so 9 data points compared to 30 something data points. Yeah, it's definitely going to be more advantageous to look at it after the month is done and have a full month worth of data.
So one of the points you brought up earlier was kind of this metric first approach versus this modality first approach. And when I start going into the article here and reading about the modalities for improvement, I jump down to this section. I do see there are these, incredible benefits of range of motion and, a different set of benefits for running drills. Today we kind of looked at kind of this metric first approach, but for example, let's say I am kind of suffering from a lot of fatigue, or I have been at higher risk for injury. Would it make sense to kind of look at this from a modality first approach instead of a metric first approach?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's part of the reason we frame it like that. Again, like you can't it's hard to just improve a metric in isolation because everything is tied to each other. So we want to make sure that we're looking at it from exercises that holistically benefit the runner. Again, that these exercises are catered towards a metric, but it's going to improve all the metrics at once. So, for example, a way to think about it is leg spring stiffness and impact loading rate. As you improve your leg spring stiffness, so that rubber band gets stiffer, it actually, even though it gives more energy back, you can think of it as if a stiffer rubber band's harder to pull apart and it might break easier because it is stiffer. So basically what you do when you increase leg spring stiffness is you might also increase impact loading rate because your muscles and joint complex are stiffer. So it just depends what you're trying to shoot for in terms of your goals and balancing those things. If I'm just trying to make sure I'm staying healthy, I'm staying consistent, then maybe, balancing that leg spring stiffness impact loading rate, maybe you're going to favor that impact loading rate and favor a modality like range of motion that has the injury prevention. Whereas if you're trying to do more performance, you're trying to get that BQ, make sure you're way under the qualifying time. Maybe leg spring stiffness is something in that balance that you favor a little bit more, and maybe that's more drills. It just depends what your goals are and putting that into context.
And what you're talking about reminds me of something that Coach Bobby McGee often says. He often says experiment of one. And can you kind of, take me through that from a kind of a higher point of view, kind of this, 10,000-foot view of experiment of one? Why is it so important that I am running with Stryd, looking at my metrics specifically, looking at it specifically how my metrics change in response to these exercises, instead of just, kind of looking at general tips or, taking advice from someone who hasn't seen my metrics? Why is experiment of one so critical?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go from a personal perspective. I ran in college, track and field. I ran at Harvard for my undergraduate and University of Virginia for my graduate, and they're completely different programs. At Harvard, it was very high mileage. I ran 6 minute flat pace for all my easy runs. It was very strength focused, whereas UVA was very the opposite, very quality, very speed focused. Volume wasn't as much of a priority, more strength and drills. And I did really well at University of Virginia, and I got really injured at Harvard. But I had teammates at both places who did really well at Harvard and I didn't, or did not so great at Virginia and I did really well. So it really just depends on the person. Everyone has different adaptations to different sorts of exercises. Um, and it's really just understanding what you need as a person, and not just taking, general advice. It can put you in the right direction, but in terms of making like your biggest gains and understanding yourself as a runner, um, understanding your unique needs and strengths and weaknesses is going to go a long way.
I think this is a great point, and this is kind of where I've arrived with Stride Data. I view myself as having kind of a unique training routine where I do a lot of slower running, I do a lot of treadmill running, and largely I've been guided by to that to that result by looking at the Stride Data continuously and seeing this really does work well for me. So um, I think over time, the utility of the Stride data only increases as you collect more and more, and that you can get great use out of Stride from day one in just establishing and estimating critical power and running by power zones. But 3 months down the line, 9 months down the line, a year down the line, you're really going to start to see the results as you compare your training routine over time.
Yeah, I think it's just exponential. Thinking about like the feedback loop and things like that. It with every iteration, it's just gonna get better and better because you're gonna figure out what works for you more and more as you go through it. Um, Getting more data points, understanding what works, and making it fit to your specific needs.
So we are taking questions in the chat. We do have one question queued up here already, but if you have any questions you've thought of throughout the entire live stream, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll either answer it live on stream here or we'll be following up in the comments here. So I do have one question for you, KO here. I'm going to serve it up on screen. And this is a question from Mark. Mark has been using Stride for a long time. I recognize Mark. And Mark is asking about impact loading rate balance. I've desperately been working on this with a 1% improvement. So, KO, what tips do you have for balance metrics? Is that something runners should be focused on? What kind of circumstances should cause them to take a closer look at balance metrics? How should Mark improve his balance? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the suite of, drills and range of motion movement exercises that we have on the Stride YouTube now will help with that. Like specifically the ones targeting impact loading rate. Because as I said, as you generally improve impact loading rate through these modalities, balance or asymmetry should hopefully get more symmetrical as well. That being said, back to the idea of an experiment of one, everyone's different. Some people might have impact loading rate where they favor the right side a little bit more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to get to 50-50. Sometimes for if you're natural and you're healthy and you're running well and your impact loading rate say 52-48, but you're feeling great and everything's good, no injuries, that's just the way you run. Going to 50-50 and like just like being so like obsessed with that, getting that perfect symmetry can oftentimes result in actually worse results for you. Because like I said, everything's a push and a pull. And really identifying things that are aligning with your subjective experience in terms of injuries and performance and things like that, I think are the most important things to focus on. Um, so again, take everything within the context of what you're experiencing. Um, but for example, if you are experiencing, so you're taking more load on the right foot and you're experiencing some injuries or injury risk on that right side, then doing, single leg exercises are really helpful with that, along with these like impact loading rate exercises across different modalities. I think that'll help a lot. Um, and working with people you trust, whether it's a PT and things like that, to see where more of your specific weaknesses are. And you can always evaluate that with footpath and see where you are getting back to your normal again.
I think you made a great point there in that imbalances aren't always a cause for concern. If it's a 51-49, that could be natural, and it's something to watch. Make sure it doesn't increase to like a 54-46. But overall, once we've established that, it's so critical to establish the baseline that then you can start making decisions once you have that baseline established. All right. So if you'd like to upgrade to the Stryd membership, head over to the Stryd mobile app or the Stryd Power Center, upgrade to that Stryd membership. That's going to give you access to the Stryd Footpath if you're using the next gen Stryd. And the Stryd Footpath can be incredibly useful to kind of help add context to metrics and visualize what in your form is actually changed, and it leads to the change in those metric results here. So we do have a few more questions here I'm going to be adding in. And here is a question from Echelon that says, how do I recognize what's wrong with my running technique? I know that imbalance is easy to recognize, cadence, but what else? Garmin has nice functionality of colors in the graphs. And I do want KO's opinion on this, but just to kind of give a short answer is, for example, at the start of this presentation, I did pull up my distribution charts, and I can view relative to runners with a similar age and the same gender as me, and I can kind of view relatively how I was performing close to them. So that could be one technique that could be useful there. Ko, how would you approach this question of how to recognize what's wrong or kind of deficiencies or areas for improvement in running technique?
Yeah, again, I really want to emphasize the priority of identifying a baseline for you. What's your normal? What's your normal when you're healthy, when you're feeling good, when you don't have any injury risk, and then move from there. I think, like Gus said, using the distributions from that normal healthy pattern will help you figure out specifically for you what might be the things that you want to work on. I see here, like follow up to that, you were talking about maybe able to determine if GCT is good or bad for a certain pace. So GCT actually aligns with duty factor. So for example, you can see at those speed buckets below, and you can click through them and see, okay, how is my GCT or my duty factor changing with different speeds? Maybe it's better at faster speeds, maybe it's worse at lower speeds, and seeing where you fall in the distribution to see if that is actually something that's the data's aligning with at the same time as your subjective experience, and moving from there. Um, that's the main thing that I would recommend. And then I think as you see like patterns in your, say, your duty factor GCT, you might also see patterns in your footpath that reflect that as well.
Terrific. And if anyone does have any more questions, feel free to drop those in the chat here. Just to cover a few more items. So subscribe to the Stryd YouTube channel. Of course, we have great videos going live like this, giving you critical educational information. Also, you get alerted when we upload new videos like drills or even content from the Stryd Performance Lab, seeing what's going on, seeing how Stryd's being used for across elite athletes or for shoe testing or performance testing. So if you want the latest, subscribe to the Stryd YouTube channel. And then also turn on notifications so you can subscribe, but then also you can also customize that subscription and turn on notifications so you know when we release new videos, when we are scheduled to go live, so you can join in, ask us questions, get your questions live answered on air here. So Ko, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share any final thoughts here on, the improving the running efficiency and kind of where this effort is going moving forward.
Yeah, you guys will, hopefully see more content expanding upon how to use, the tools that we have available, whether it's metrics or footpath, to improve your running efficiency, and hopefully just give you more practical insights to how you do that, and give you more, simple ideas of, what's wrong. Nothing's necessarily wrong, but what can you improve? How can I improve it? and then seeing actually if the things that we're implementing are improving it the way that you want to. And really just, again, just emphasizing the fact of everyone's their own experiment, their own comparison, and comparing within yourself and having goals to where you want to get to and seeing where you how you're improving and things like that is the most important thing rather than just saying, "Oh, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my form? What's wrong with this?" It's, "Oh, okay, this is the way I look. This is something I want to improve. Let's see how this improves over time. Oh, actually, my form's improving the way I want to." Everything's interconnected. Um, so yeah, really just that experiment of one and um, just keep using that feedback loop because it is really important.
Well, thank you so much for joining today, KO, and sharing your knowledge. And thanks so much for the Stride community for tuning in. We can't wait to deliver more awesome features for you and more awesome educational material. So stay tuned for more. I hope everyone has a great day and